of the large community Russia, who formed just that cortege which had galloped along the street, he compared to the birds turkeys. He developed this thought of his in a long dissertation thus: if we analyze impartially and sum up statistically this understanding, and picturing which, obtain among people of the contemporary civilization concerning the races which populate Europe, in contradistinction to other continents, and make an analogy between these races and birds, then the people who represent the very zimus of contemporary European civilization, namely those who arise and dwell on the continent Europe, must infallibly be called peacocks, that is, the birds who have the most beautiful and most gorgeous exterior, while the people who dwell on the other continents must be called crows, that is, the most good-for-nothing and dirty of all birds. But for those contemporary people who obtain the basis and the required conditions for their arising on the continent of Europe, and who are formed on it, but whose subsequent life, and consequently further stuffing, proceeds for some reason or other on other continents, and also for those contemporary people who, on the contrary, appear on God's earth on any continent and obtain their further stuffing under the conditions arising and reigning on the continent Europe, no better comparison can be found than the bird turkey. This latter bird, more than all other birds, expresses a something which is neither fish, flesh, fowl, nor good red herring, but which represents in itself, as is said, a half with a quarter plus 3/4. The best representatives of these turkeys are the contemporary people of Russia, and it was by these turkeys, namely, that one of the chief crows of this country was surrounded, who not long ago rapidly passed by us. These Russians, moreover, correspond ideally to this peculiar bird turkey, as the following considerations of mine show. Arising and being formed on the continent Asia, but chiefly owing to a clean heredity, organic as well as psychic, forged in the course of many centuries in conditions of existence obtained on the said continent, they become, in all respects, the possessors of the nature of Asiatic people, and consequently they should also, at the present time, be crows. But in view of the fact that in recent times they have all been striving hard to become Europeans, and have with intent been thoroughly stuffing themselves accordingly, they thereby, little by little, are ceasing to be crows, and as, according to several undoubtedly lawful data, they cannot turn into real peacocks, they, leaving the crows behind and not yet reaching to the peacocks, are in themselves, as I have said, ideally turkeys. Although the turkey is a very useful bird for the household, because its meat, if of course the turkey is killed in that special way which people of old nations have there learned thanks to long centuries of practice, is better and more tasty than that of all other birds, yet in its living state, the turkey is a very strange bird and has a certain very special psyche, to understand which, even though only approximately, is, especially for our people with their half-passive minds, quite impossible. One of the many specific features of the psyche of this strange bird is that the turkey, why I don't know, considers it always necessary to swagger, and thus will often, for no reason whatever, puff himself out. Even when nobody is looking at him, he swaggers and puffs himself out, though he does so, in this case, exclusively because of his own imagination and silly dreams. Having said this, Mullah Nasr-ad-Din got up slowly and heavily, and again pronouncing his favorite saying, "So-and-so, this must be it," but this time with the ending, "Don't sit long where you shouldn't sit." took me by the arm, and together we descended from the roof. Here, my boy, while giving the subtlety of the psychological analysis of our most wise Mullah Nasr ad-Din its due, justice demands that it should be said that if these Russians have become such exemplary turkeys, we have in this case to blame it only once more on to those beings of the community Germany. The beings of Germany were in this case guilty, owing to the fact that when they invented their famous aniline dyes, they overlooked one of the specific peculiarities of these dyes. The point is that with the help of these dyes, it is possible to dye all natural colors except one only, namely, genuine natural black, any other color. And it is thanks to this lack of foresight in these German beings that the scandalous misfortune for the poor Russians came about. That is to say, it is owing to the fact that the feathers of the crows are dyed by nature, as it unsuspectingly and unexpectedly turned out, just a genuine black, which, even with these aniline dyes invented by themselves, cannot possibly be dyed any other color, owing to the said vile imperfection of these dyes, that these poor Russian crows cannot therefore possibly become peacocks. And what is worst of all, having ceased to be crows, and not yet having become peacocks, they willy-nilly turn into the bird turkey, which expresses ideally, as has been formulated by our dear teacher, 1/2 with 1/4 plus 3/4. Well, thanks to the wise definition of the esteemed Mullah Nasr ad-Din, which he told me himself, I clearly understood for the first time why all the beings of that large community there, when they reach responsible age, become possessors of so sharply dual an individuality. But enough about this. Listen further now to the events in which I happened to take part after my arrival in the chief place of existence of the community Russia, then called St. Petersburg. As I've already said, while my acquaintance, the said important Russian, settled up his affairs which had become disorganized during his absence, I began to go about everywhere and meet beings there of different, as is said, class and position, in order to study the characteristic particularities of their manners and customs, and to make clear for myself the cause of their so-called organic need for alcohol, and the manifest consequences also of the result of its effects on their common presences. It is interesting to remark that during these meetings of mine with the various three-brained beings belonging to various castes and positions, I had already by then constated several times, and it had, after more attentive observation, become quite evident to me that the majority of them carried in themselves the germ of that particular functioning of their common presences, which had already long before been habitually arising in your favorites owing to a certain combination of two independent causes coming from outside. The first of these causes is a common cosmic law which exists under the name of solunensis, and the second is a sharp deterioration of the conditions of the usual being existence of the beings on some part of the surface of this planet of yours. I speak about that germ of the particular functioning of their common presences, which, after several of their years, became molded in the presences of all beings of this community in such a usual form as had already during certain definite periods become in general inherent in